The romance between my wife and her best friend appeared on TV. Now I've told her parents and my daughters. I'm 45 years old, an executive at a company, while my wife, Amy, also 45, is a housewife. She used to work at a nursery in her 20s, but after we got married, she decided to stay home. We have 2 daughters, Emma, 13, and Ella, 11. We were a happy family until the truth about my wife's affair came to light, thanks to our smart TV. Last week was our friend John's birthday. He has been living in another country for the past few years. We video called him at midnight to wish him a happy birthday. After congratulating him, the 4 of us, my wife and I, along with John and his wife, kept talking about work and life. We had no other plans for the night, so we decided to spend some time together virtually. John's wife suggested that we could stream the WhatsApp video call on the TV. That way we could relax and have a good time together. John's wife and Amy are also good friends, and we used to go out a lot when they were in town. Anyway, Amy connected her phone to the TV because the TV's remote control app was already installed and active on her phone. We grabbed some beers and snacks and enjoyed the virtual celebration. After a while, Amy started feeling dizzy and fell asleep on the couch while John and I continued talking. His wife had also fallen asleep. After about 15 to 20 minutes, the call disconnected due to internet fluctuations, and my wife's WhatsApp screen appeared on the TV. I was about to call John again when I noticed more than 10 unread messages from someone named Lifeline with a Heart. I was a bit surprised because they weren't for me. Curiosity got the best of me. So I clicked on the profile picture and discovered that it was her childhood friend, Matt. I've seen him many times since my marriage because my wife was close to him. They were neighbors and school friends. She once told me that everyone around them in the neighborhood and at school thought they were dating or would eventually end up together. However, that never happened, according to my wife. She never saw him as a romantic partner. Plus, Matt wasn't interested in women. According to his current status, Matt was single. I wasn't too concerned about seeing that because my wife told me he wasn't interested in women. However, right then, another message from that conversation popped up. "Honey, I miss you." That led me to dig deeper. Openly, I clicked on Matt's chat. I discovered that my wife had been chatting with him this whole time on her phone while we were on the video call. Unfortunately for him, she unexpectedly fell asleep without giving him a goodnight kiss, so he was bombarding her WhatsApp. After his messages were marked as read, he wrote things like, "Why aren't you responding? Is everything okay? I can't sleep without your goodnight kiss. I can't get over today's session. You were so good today." This couldn't just be a conversation between good friends. At that moment, I was sure their relationship went beyond friendship. I scrolled up in the chat and discovered that they had been having sexual conversations almost every night. I went through all the filthy messages she exchanged with her lover friend. The chats had occasional flashes of explicit photos and nudes in between, which gave me chills. I was numb, but I wanted to know everything that had happened between them. I didn't know how to take screenshots of these conversations on the TV, so I used my phone to take pictures of the TV screen. After taking 4 or 5 pictures, I stopped. I didn't care about gathering evidence, I just wanted to know why and how. I wanted to scream, howl, and vent my frustration, but I didn't know how to confront her. It was 2 in the morning and I had already had countless beers combined with a few whiskey shots. I barely had the energy to move or even think. I just kept scrolling through the chat, watching my marriage fall apart in front of me on the big screen. Everything felt meaningless at that moment. She shared every minute detail with her lover, even the details of our intimate moments. In fact, after every private moment between us, she would repeat the same with him to make up for his feelings. I felt disgusted. I wanted to know when it all started, so I kept scrolling. But it seemed like an endless ocean, growing deeper even when I reached its deepest corner. By then, Matt's messages had stopped coming, and the house was silent. I grabbed a cushion next to me just to make sure I wasn't dreaming or hallucinating. I kept scrolling aimlessly when Amy suddenly woke up from her sleep. Her drowsy head suddenly snapped into focus as she saw her double life displayed on the TV screen. She immediately snatched the remote from my hand and turned off the TV. Then she lunged for her phone and disconnected it from the TV. I just stared at her in shock. I saw her open her WhatsApp chat, scroll through her lover's messages, and then close the app. She took my face in her hands and moved closer, saying, "Honey, I can explain, please listen to me." I stared at her and replied, "Sure, please explain." She was shocked by my response. She expected me to overreact and not listen to her. I would have done the same if it had been 2:30 in the afternoon instead of 2:30 in the morning. I was almost passing out, partly from the alcohol and mostly from the truth I had just found out. I repeated, "Damn it, explain." She was speechless. She mumbled, "Actually, well, you know." Having said that, I walked toward the bedroom. She followed me. but I turned around and asked her to stay outside while I shut the door in her face. I heard her knock a few times, but soon I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy head, almost forgetting what had happened the night before. I stepped out of my room to grab a bottle of water. My throat was dry. As soon as she saw me come out of the room, she rushed toward me, and with that sight, all the horrible memories from last night came flooding back. She tried to hug me, but I asked her to stay away. She stepped back with tears in her eyes and a puppy-like face. She told me I had misunderstood things. I ignored her and went to the fridge to grab a bottle of water. She kept pestering me, saying that I was just overreacting and that Matt was only a friend. They never had any physical relationship. It was just chatting, just healthy flirting. I wasn't ready for a confrontation yet, but her dumb excuses infuriated me, and I shouted even louder, "Really? Who the hell sends nudes to male friends? And sexting? Wasn't he supposed to be uninterested in women? Then how the hell did he find interest in your private parts?" It was a Saturday morning, and luckily, my kids weren't home. They were spending their summer vacation with my parents. I looked at her, demanding an explanation. My mental state was pathetic. I wanted to get to the core of the situation despite knowing it would shatter me into pieces. I wanted her to confess every detail of her crime, but I felt like vomiting every time she opened her mouth. I clenched my teeth, asking her to speak, but then silencing her whenever she did. I don't know what I was doing. I know I acted irrationally. But how else would someone react after learning they had been cheated on for the last 15 years and that their entire married life had been a lie? I chugged the entire bottle of water in one go, then demanded that she confess everything from the beginning, or else I would beat her lover until he was black and blue. This time, instead of covering things up or pleading, she revealed the truth. She confessed that she and Matt had always been lovers. They started a physical relationship in high school and had continued ever since. However, Matt was a bum and made it clear to Amy that he couldn't afford to support her. To give some context about Matt, he was a school dropout who had never earned a penny on his own. His parents owned some decent rental properties in the suburbs, and the rent income covered his expenses. However, that wasn't enough to support two people. I met his parents a few times when visiting Amy's house. They were worried about Matt's laziness and had asked Amy to advise him to get a job or start a business. Everyone except Matt was concerned about his future. Anyway, back to the topic. Amy confessed that she had cut ties with Matt many times because of his lack of commitment. However, he always managed to win her back. Apparently, Matt never had a problem with Amy dating other men, even though he never dated anyone other than Amy. She had a couple of boyfriends before we started dating, so this sounded true to me. But what kind of lover does that? I know, maybe a lazy one. I asked her why she didn't marry him if they were so close. She said Matt would never have been able to provide her with a good lifestyle. Besides, Amy never had a stable job. She didn't even have any career aspirations to be the household provider, so she chose to be an opportunist and live a double life. I asked her one last question, whether the girls were mine or Matt's. She swore they were mine. I wasn't convinced and still doubted her. She suggested I get a DNA test if I wasn't sure. She said she couldn't risk having children with Matt because she was afraid that if the truth came out and I abandoned the kids, she was certain Matt wouldn't be able to raise them even if he wanted to. I don't know if I should feel relieved to at least know the girls are mine. I told her to leave the house, or else I would expose her truth to everyone, including our daughters. They might be young, but they were smart enough to understand the truth. She begged me not to tell our daughters, saying they would hate and disrespect her. I refilled my water bottle, grabbed a few bottles of beer, went into my room, and locked the door. I sat in front of my laptop, staring at the screen for over an hour. I didn't know what to do next or who to talk to. The truth was killing me inside. I felt suffocated. After finishing the beer, I left my room, grabbed my car keys, and drove to my in-laws' house, which was 30 minutes away. My mother-in-law answered the door with a warm smile, but as soon as she saw my red face, she knew something was wrong. She called my father-in-law, who rushed out of his room and sat me down. I told them I didn't know a better way to confront this. As I narrated everything, my throat dried up and my body temperature rose. Halfway through, we heard someone banging on the door. It was Amy. She stormed into the house, furious, demanding that I leave immediately. She said this was a private matter that we should handle ourselves and not involve her parents. The next few hours were filled with rage and emotional torment. I lashed out at her for cheating on me for 15 years while she downplayed it as a casual affair that meant nothing to her. Gradually, she shifted the blame onto me for turning her parents against her, and I defended myself. My in-laws took my side and scolded her. I spent the entire weekend drinking, passing out occasionally, and refilling my stomach with alcohol. The next day was Monday, Feeling groggy and exhausted at work, I Googled some divorce lawyers and scheduled an appointment with one. When I returned home, I noticed that some of her belongings were missing. I assumed she had packed up and left while I was gone. I didn't bother checking. Later, she texted me, saying she would stay at a hotel to give me time to cool down. She flooded my phone with messages, begging for forgiveness and promising to end her affair with her lover, but I don't understand how she could call it something trivial. A week has passed since that fateful day. Today is Friday. The week has been agonizingly slow. I anticipate the weekend will feel even longer. I have an appointment with the lawyer this Monday. I've been searching through Reddit stories for a solution, but my case seems more complicated than most, even to me. I worry about my daughters. How should I approach them? Should I even confront them? Update 1. Thank you all for the solid advice. My apologies for not updating sooner, but I reached out to some of you via private messages and comments. I know it's been 6 months since my first post, and let me tell you, it has been nothing short of a bumpy road. I met with the lawyer that Monday and shared my concerns about my daughters. The lawyer advised me to subtly talk to the girls about the separation and not go into details, as they might experience mental trauma. He also mentioned that since my wife is unemployed and considering the nature of her affair, I had a good chance of gaining custody. That same day, my parents called Amy to pick up the girls from their house. They were still unaware of the situation. She brought the girls home while I was exhausted on the couch after the stressful meeting with the lawyer. I avoided any conversation in front of the kids and retreated to my room. When she entered the room, I told her to tell the girls about her adultery. She started sobbing and begged for forgiveness, repeating that the girls would hate her for this. I guess they should. They have every right to. What else is expected after betraying her family for 15 years? The lawyer said it would take about a week to serve Amy with the divorce papers, so I had a week to sort things out with the girls and my parents. I told her I was divorcing her. She reacted as if this came out of nowhere, claiming that the divorce would traumatize the girls. I repeated that my decision was final and gave her a week to tell the girls however she wanted, or else I would tell them the truth. I grabbed my pillows and slept on the couch in the bedroom. All that week, I left the house early in the morning and returned late at night. As the weekend approached, she cried and screamed all night, sometimes so loudly that she woke me up. Yes, I felt sorry for her, but how could she do this for so many years? What was she thinking? That she would never be discovered? On Friday night, she told me that she had planned a way to confront the girls the next day. On Saturday, after breakfast, she told the girls that we had some news for them. She said that I had been transferred to a different country, so I would be moving away for a few years. I was stunned as my daughters stared at me. I sarcastically asked her in front of the girls if this meant I had to move out of the house. She rolled her eyes, signaling me to keep quiet. She continued, suggesting that if the house was too big for the three of them, they could move to her parents' house and then find a smaller place. The girls were perplexed but not stupid. They understood the game she was trying to play. My younger daughter told Amy that what she was saying didn't make sense, while the older one asked us directly, "Are you getting a divorce?" I gave Amy a look, urging her to tell the truth. She sighed and broke down. The girls looked at me for answers. I told them they were right about our divorce. I explained that we no longer felt compatible with each other. My older daughter assumed that maybe I was having an affair and that's why Amy was crying. She took her mother's hand and asked if I had been unfaithful to her. Instead of clearing things up, Amy simply hugged her in anticipation. The girls looked at me with disgust. I lost my mind at that manipulative woman. I was stunned to see how she turned things against me. I told my daughters everything, how I discovered the truth and what their mother had been doing. Of course, I left out the explicit details. Amy screamed at me for revealing everything. She said I had given her the freedom to explain things to the girls however she wanted. So why didn't I support her when she was telling them about my transfer? The situation was out of control, and I decided to put a stop to Amy's manipulation. I called my parents and my in-laws and asked them to come over as soon as possible. They both lived about 25 to 30 minutes away, and in less than an hour, all four of them were at my house. That hour was a nightmare for me, one I will never forget in my life. My daughters cried while hugging me, and seeing this, Amy tried her best to justify her actions. She even went as far as portraying me as a liar and manipulating the girls against me. She only stopped when I told her I had pictures of those conversations. My parents were shocked to see the situation we were in. I briefly explained what had happened, and by the end, everyone was angry at Amy. She kept sobbing and begging for forgiveness. For a moment, I felt sorry for her. It also hurt me to see her in this condition, but she brought this upon herself. Instead of painting me as the villain in front of my daughters, she could have just said that we didn't love each other anymore, or something like that. But she wasn't willing to take even the smallest amount of blame, and now her ugly truth was exposed in front of everyone, including her daughters. It was clear that we were moving forward with the divorce and that the girls would be staying with me. I asked her parents to take her away. Even the girls asked her to leave. My parents decided to stay with us for a few weeks and take care of us. It was undoubtedly a difficult time for us, but I'm glad we came out stronger. I've enrolled in therapy for all three of us, and we are doing much better now. My divorce proceedings are underway. Amy has claimed a share of my house, which I am disputing because she doesn't deserve a single penny. Surprisingly, she did not contest custody of the children, which made it easy and obvious for us to understand where her priorities lay, both during the confrontation and even afterward. Amy promised to cut all ties with her lover, however. After moving in with her parents, they caught her visiting his house. Her brothers caught her and humiliated her to the point that she eventually had to leave their house. Her parents humiliated Matt for his actions and informed his parents as well. The last I heard, his parents had cut off all the rental income from properties that Matt was receiving and told him to fend for himself. Meanwhile, Amy now works as a sales agent at a showroom. I don't think about her anymore. I'm focusing on raising my daughters and providing for them as best as I can. Wish me luck. Story 2. I cut off all contact with my mom at 18 for abusing me and my sister, but my wife told her where I work. My wife, 26, and I, 27, have known each other for 10 years and got married in 2018. We have very different lifestyles. She is a devout Mormon and I am not religious. Still, we found ways to make it work. It's been a difficult journey and there are still some challenges, but we love each other very much. She has never met my biological mother. My parents divorced long before I met her, and I cut off contact with my mom after I turned 18. My mother was extremely abusive to me while I was growing up. She physically abused both me and my sister regularly and tried to blame my father. She managed to manipulate a doctor into prescribing me multiple medications as a child, and then she stole them from me. Her despicable boyfriend also tried to be abusive toward me. I cut off all contact with my mother and her side of the family. My dad and stepmother did not approve of my wife at first because of her religion, but now they get along well. When my wife asked me when she would meet my mom, I told her she never would. My mother is a violent and terrible person who has no place in my life, and I didn't want her involved in ours. I also told her not to contact anyone from my mom's family. Recently, my mother showed up at my workplace, even though she had no idea where I worked. The situation escalated, and security had to call the police to remove her from the property. It was embarrassing. When I got home, I told my wife, and she just had this terrified expression on her face. I asked her what that meant, and she confessed that she had contacted my mom and told her where I worked because my mom wanted to make amends. My wife believes that everyone deserves forgiveness and that there's nothing that can't be forgiven. I told her that she violated the one boundary I had made clear and that she didn't even tell me until it all went wrong. Of course, she has been apologizing. I told her we would get there, but I needed time to process everything. I've been sleeping in the home office and have barely spoken to her since. We are supposed to travel to her parents' house for Thanksgiving, but I am seriously considering staying home with the dog so I can clear my thoughts. I'm not sure how to get past this. Update 1. I appreciate the support from those who messaged me last time I posted 4 months ago, as well as those who are interested in what happened next. I didn't expect this to get so big. I'll give an update in chronological order, but I warn you that it contains details about minor abuse. To start, my mother was served with a restraining order. She cannot go to my workplace, and I had no issues at work because of what happened. Before Thanksgiving, my wife and I sat down to talk. I told her I wouldn't be going to her parents' house for the holiday, and I thought it would be best if we spent some time apart. She was upset and scared because she has a lot of anxiety when traveling far alone, so her sister agreed to travel with her. But during this conversation, I asked to see the messages between her and my mother. It turns out my mother had been harassing her for months, sending Facebook messages asking how I was, if I was alive, saying she hadn't heard from her son, etc. That part is what made my wife respond. In an update about everything, she mentioned my job and named the place, of which there's only one location in our city. I knew they had been contacted, just like me, my sister, and her husband, but I didn't know my mother had been constantly harassing my wife like that. In the time between my mother showing up in this conversation, my mother sent several messages accusing her of setting her up, keeping her son away from her, and other very nasty messages. She went to her parents' house and I made burgers and spent time with the dog for Thanksgiving. I went to my dad's house that Friday while everyone there was out doing Black Friday shopping. We hung up Christmas lights and I told him what happened. Surprisingly, my dad didn't have much to say. He asked what I was going to do. I asked him for a specific file he had, and I told him I would show it to her. My wife came back home after almost a week, and the next day, I made her sit down, and we had a conversation, and I brought out the file. Clearly, she hadn't meant for any of this to happen, but she asked if I was going to divorce her. I said no, but she should have told me what happened. And I should have blocked my mother if she kept insisting on messaging her. At this point, I opened the file, put it in front of her, and she went completely pale. In the file were the photos of me from the night my mother gave up custody. What happened was that we had a fight over my high school grades. My mother started hitting me repeatedly, to the point where her nails began cutting my face. At this point, I was big enough to stop her. I grabbed her wrist and twisted it just enough to make her stop and ran out of the house. The police were called because my mother claimed I had broken her wrist. I hadn't. My dad picked me up, took pictures of my bruised and cut up face, and my mother gave up custody. Some of those cuts left scars that are still visible on my cheek and sideburn area. After explaining what she was seeing, she looked through everything in the file. I told her she needed to understand that she had opened the door for my mom to do this to me again, and if we had kids, they would be at risk of the same abuse because my mom hasn't changed. Her messages were from a master manipulator going after my innocent wife. She said she didn't know it was that serious and didn't want this to happen. I told her we needed to go to therapy as a non-negotiable, and she agreed. I got some criticism from her parents for showing her the file. Her parents made me promise to protect her and not ruin her innocent view of the world. She had an understanding of real-world issues that wasn't very present in her church upbringing, though they did actually agree that she shouldn't have responded to my mom, which was surprising. I did some solo therapy before we started couples therapy. She was a little upset that I was distant during the holidays. It was like I wasn't there. Apparently, I had some kind of repressed or undiagnosed PTSD, and I started dissociating again after this happened, which would explain why I didn't seem present. I feel like we're making progress. The therapist said my wife had this subconscious desire to fix things and create her perfect family, due to some issues with her parents and problems on both sides of her family, so that was probably why she responded without consulting me. We've stopped trying for a baby for now, which devastated her, especially because one of my stepsisters announced she was pregnant, and it really hurt her because she really wants to be a mother. We're spending time together again and sleeping in the same bed. She's trying really hard to make it up to me and has been trying to read more about abuse and understand these things, which is difficult for her. We tried to get things back to normal during Christmas and New Year's. Right now, we have therapy sessions every 2 weeks, and I see my therapist in the in-between weeks. Looking back, showing her the file with those photos may have been too much. Our therapist said it was probably overwhelming for her, but I mentioned it in our session and said it that night. She needed to fully understand what door she had opened and what consequences could have come from what she did, as well as what could happen to our hypothetical children if she ever opened the door again. I'm not sure if there was an alternative to showing her that file, but I think she now understands what I really went through. Sometimes my wife traces the scar lines on my face and looks at me in a strange way. She never questioned those scars before. That's where we are. I think things are salvageable. From how things looked before, it seemed like she was seeking out my mom, but I think she was just tricked and tried to give my mom some peace of mind without realizing she was creating a problem she didn't understand. Thanks again to those who reached out and offered support before. Edit. It's not necessary to read this, but for context, the example my wife gave in therapy about my lack of presence was this. We have a tradition in the second week of December. We go out together, have breakfast, and do our Christmas shopping, usually at Target because she likes getting a hot chocolate from Starbucks. But while we were there, she would look at me, and I was often just staring into the distance or not giving full responses. I admitted that I don't remember most of what we did that day, which made her sad because that's one of the parts of the holiday she looks forward to the most, spending that day together.